Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. So, hello everyone, and welcome. So tonight, cool. So tonight we'll be doing probably just standard breath meditation. I debated for a while whether there was a meditation applicable to April Fool's Day, but there wasn't really one that came to mind. Yeah. So we'll just start with some standard breath meditation. We'll go from there. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing how deep breathing feels for the body. If it feels good, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, you can switch things up. Try even deeper still or more shallow, heavier or lighter. In long, out short, or in short and out long. Just noticing how these different types of breathing feel for the body. And noticing which one feels best for the body in this moment. while maintaining this effective rhythm of the breath. You can begin to notice if you're straining throughout any part of the breathing process. And see if you can relax that strain, where you're not forcing the breath in or squeezing it out. You're just suggesting what you'd like the breath to do and allowing it to follow through. Recognizing when the mind has wandered, releasing our hold on the distraction, not gripping onto it nor pushing it away, simply releasing. Relaxing any tension caused by this distraction, and returning to the breath. And when you return to the breath, you can take an especially pleasant and especially gratifying breath to reward yourself for coming back. There's a tendency to think that when we want the mind to stay present with us here, there's this tendency to think that clamping down on it, trying to pin it into place with force, would be effective. We don't want it to wander off, so we try to pin it down. But this is counterproductive. If you want the mind to stay in the present moment, you have to make it a pleasant moment. You have to make it a pleasant place to stay. So we relax tension, we soften into the breath. And through this, we're able to maintain this mindful awareness through positive conditioning. Once we've begun to settle in with the breath here, we can start to expand this breath awareness out to other parts of the body. Noticing as we're breathing in and breathing out, if there's tension, any patterns of tension throughout the body. Maybe starting with the shoulders and the forehead. Seeing if we can identify any tension and consciously relax it all the way through the in-breath and all the way through the out-breath. With tension in the forehead and shoulders relaxed, you can slowly begin to work your way through the rest of the body at your own pace, flowing down the body, noticing any tension throughout. And when you eventually get to the soles of the feet, you can scan back up through the body, seeing if there's any tension you missed during the first pass through. And this is all we'll do for the remainder of this session. Scanning through the body, relaxing tension with the breath. Recognize that the mind has wandered. Release the distraction. Relax the forehead and the shoulders, and return to this scanning of the body. Returning to the breath. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Slowly beginning to open the eyes when ready and stretching if needed. Careful not to let the mind go flowing right back out with the eyes. See if we can open the eyes but still maintain this calm center we've been cultivating. The sense of the body from within. So as always, if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them, or if anyone has any questions or comments about Buddhism in general, feel free to ask them in the chat. Yeah. So, funny thing with, because I'd mentioned at the beginning, with it being April 1st, April Fools, I was thinking of what kind of meditation could we do that would apply to April Fools. And for some reason, the 5 recollections I didn't happen to recollect them. But with April Fools, oftentimes the case is that you tell little white lies, little harmless lies. I won't even get into that. But the 5 recollections are a practice about directly confronting the ways that we lie to ourselves. Some of the prominent ways in which, in general, people lie to themselves concerning aging, illness, death, separation. So you guys got off easy with the breath meditation tonight. It was right after we started meditating, I got distracted by that thought, oh, we could have did 5 recollections. Some people love it. I personally love it. A lot of people don't love it very much. So, yeah. Maybe we'll do that next week. If I recollect next week that I said tonight that we'll do the 5 recollections, we'll be doing that. So, there might be something I'd like to read. So, something. So, Sherry shared, I found that understanding the connection between shallow breathing and anxiety life-changing. Do you have any other technique recommendations for breathing and anxiety? Yes. So the understanding the different ways that we're breathing and how they relate to different emotions, like the shallow breathing and anxiety, or heavy breathing and tiredness, all sorts of different things to notice. And I can't necessarily say that everyone would connect shallow breathing with anxiety. For some people, shallow breathing maybe is calming. So it varies person to person. It's something to experiment with on your own. If you maintain a type of breathing for a while and you notice how the body reacts, how the mind responds. But one thing that I personally find helpful is, it's another kind of meditation, and for some people it might actually make them anxious, but it's another type of meditation that I lead that I don't lead it that often, but the expanding mind meditation. And I think we even have a short guided one on the playlists, temple guided meditation playlists on our YouTube. But the expanding mind meditation helps me with anxiety and a lot of other stagnant emotions, unpleasant emotions. And basically, the way in which it helps with anxiety is when we start to get anxious, we become, our sense of self, or our sense of, not self, but our sense of physical existence tends to shrink. So when we're anxious, we're rarely inhabiting the entire body, right? When we're anxious, we're up in our head. We're this tiny little ball in the middle of the head, freaking out, bouncing around all over the place. And then all of our problems seem so much more intense, so much bigger, because we've indirectly, but because we've shrunk ourselves through this anxiety. And maybe this sounds a little strange, but our experience in that moment of anxiety is very small. We feel claustrophobic. We feel like the walls are closing in on us. All of that shrinks down our felt experience of the present moment. So when we can first start by trying to expand out to the fingertips and the toes, and then we can hold the perception that it's possible to expand beyond the body. It's possible to not only embody out to the toes and the fingers, but to embody the room itself. And this is, again, there's a guided meditation for this. If you're interested and want to go watch it, it's on the YouTube. So when we expand beyond the body, there's a verse or an image that the Buddha uses that I really like. It's not directly related to expanding beyond the body, but it's about expanding the mind. So he says, if you drop a lump of salt into a cup of water, the water is very salty. If you drop a lump of salt into a river, you can't tell that you drop salt in the river. The water doesn't get the taste of the salt because the river is bigger. The amount of salt may be the same, but what the salt's getting added to has expanded. We're not in a constricted mind state. We're not in a constricted sense of being. So the anxiety, instead of seeming all-encompassing, the anxiety actually shrinks instead of the anxiety shrinking us. So that's what comes to mind with that. Try expanding. You can combine this with the shallow breathing. You can do really deep, slow breathing. And unless that makes you anxious, some people who maybe are claustrophobic won't like slow, deep breathing for an extended period of time. But slow, deep breathing, and with each breath, expand awareness, expand awareness. And if you hold the perception in mind that it's possible, again, to expand beyond the body, our felt experience reflects our belief that that's a possibility. Whether or not it's literally happening, that we're expanding our awareness past our body, isn't the point. The point is we have a visual anchor for expanding the mind and expanding our mind state. So yeah, that's what comes to mind. Hopefully that's helpful. So Sherry shared, that makes a lot of sense. I will check out the expanding mind meditation. I really relate to the shrinking experience of anxiety. Hopefully you find it beneficial. It helps with a lot of mind states. It helps with anything that kind of makes it feel like the walls are closing in on us or makes us feel insignificant. Any kind of mind state that does that, the expanding mind meditation has a way of kind of surpassing that or rising above that. And I've also noticed that it really helps with my reactivity, because there's not these huge things coming in and confronting me. There's just drops in the bucket instead of tidal waves. So, yeah. So one thing that came to mind, and of course this isn't prepared or anything, but one thing that came to mind with, because why would I prepare? That came to mind with April Fool's Day is there's actually verses in something called the Dhammapada. And the Dhammapada is a collection of the words of the Buddha. It's one of several texts. And it's kind of in these poetic verses. They're not super poetic sounding when translated into English, but originally they're very poetic sounding, right? But they're written in verse, and basically there's different categories. One of the categories is fools. So I thought in honor of April Fool's Day, maybe I'll read a couple of these. And these verses are kind of intended to be read and then pondered and sat with. Something that can be really good is to read a short sutra or even just one of these verses from the Dhammapada before you meditate, and then just sit and do your meditation and see if anything afterwards, when you reflect back on it, not during the meditation, don't waste the meditation stuck in thought loops, but after the meditation, you can reflect back and see if the meaning has changed to you at all. It's a really engaging, really fun practice to do. So this one here, this is one of my favorite verses in the Fools section. Even if for a lifetime the fool stays with the wise, he knows nothing of the Dharma, as the ladle the taste of the soup. Even if for a moment the perceptive person stays with the wise, they immediately know the Dharma, as the tongue the taste of the soup. So what I really like about this verse, and the reasons it's one of my favorites, is there's this tendency to, when we start practicing, to want to share this practice with everyone, right? It's like, oh my gosh, this has made such a difference in my life. I'm going to harass everyone I know about it. Everyone I know, I'm going to harass them about my Buddhist practice. And most people don't like that. Some people will be interested, sure, but the majority of them won't. And that can be really challenging when you feel like you're sitting here with gold, right? You feel like you've found something truly valuable and you want to share it with those you care about, or just anyone who will listen at the bus stop. So what this verse really helps me with is, and the wording of the fool is a bit strong, but I think maybe that's a case of translation, because basically all that the fool means is someone who doesn't have the current capacity within them to practice. That's just not in a place to practice. So with this, the fool, even if for a lifetime, the fool stays with the wise. They know nothing of the Dharma, just as a ladle can't taste the soup that it's sitting in. No matter how long the ladle sits in the soup, it can't taste it. So even if there's this amazing thing in front of someone, if they're just not ready for it, if they're just not in a place for it, they won't see its benefit. And we can drive ourselves crazy. We can leave a foul taste in our mouths, trying to go around and fix everyone else or teach everyone else the Dharma, because it's made a difference in our life. And then the second verse, even if for a moment the perceptive person stays with the wise, they immediately know the Dharma, just as a tongue can taste soup immediately upon contact. So you share this with someone and you get basically one of two reactions. Either they're interested and they want to know more, or they're dismissive and they don't really care. If they're dismissive and they don't really care, maybe stop trying to push it. If they're interested and they want to learn more, discuss more. But don't drive yourself crazy thinking, oh, this is the approach that's going to get that person to see how this could be beneficial for them. Even oftentimes discussing with people, it'll be like their spouse or something. They're like, well, my spouse is so impatient. If they would just meditate with me, things would be better. Well, maybe if you just meditated, more things would be better. So we can have this tendency to drive ourselves crazy, trying to fix someone else or show someone else how beneficial this practice is. But if they're not in a place to receive the benefit, we're just upsetting ourselves and upsetting them. So that's something I found really helpful. There's two other verses here. There's a lot of verses, but I'm trying to keep it concise. But there's a few verses here that inspired. I don't know how many of you have heard me talk before about how I create new mnemonics, memory tools to help me remember certain Buddhist concepts and help me distance from the conventional concept of what that might mean, or the societal concept of what that might mean. So one of them is, instead of thinking of it in terms of ego, because with the word ego, you have wrapped up like ego death and all this other new age spirituality stuff. That's not necessarily what this practice is about. So I use, when I'm thinking about like the ego of the mind and stuff like that, I use the term imp, I-M-P. And it's a bit funny, but it's something that I'll remember. And it's something I can use kind of as a mantra. And imp stands for I maker, my maker, bitter apple pie baker. So basically it's referencing the ego, but without all the other connotations that are wrapped up in the word ego. I maker, my maker, bitter apple pie baker. Because the mind's very much like an imp, like a little fiend. And it'll take things that are not that appealing. It'll take bitter apples and it'll dress them up as this delicious apple pie. and we get entranced by it. We get captivated by it. And we're kind of hypnotized by it. And then eventually when we bite into the pie, provided that we're a tongue and not a ladle, when we bite into the pie, we can taste bitter fruit. It leaves a bitter taste in the mouth. So the mind will dress up a lot of things as being beneficial or being beautiful or being delicious or whatever it is. But then when we actually pursue them, we start tripping on ourselves and we cause ourselves pain. And all we're left with afterwards is not a sense of satisfaction, but just a bitter taste in the mouth. So what that comes from, what the I maker, my maker, bitter apple pie baker comes from, is that karma is often referred to as bearing fruit. And in these couple of verses here, fools their wisdom weak, they are their own enemy. As they go through life doing unskillful things that bear bitter fruit. So that's kind of where that comes from. Fools, their wisdom weak, are their own enemies as they go through life doing unskillful things that bear bitter fruit. As long as the unskillfulness has yet to ripen, the fool mistakes it for honey. But when that unskillfulness ripens, the fool falls into pain. And this basically just echoes what I just talked about. The mind will dress things up as being pleasant. It'll trick you into mistaking vinegar for honey. So as long as unskillfulness has yet to ripen, the fool mistakes it for honey. But when that unskillfulness ripens, the fool falls into pain. So we go through, we think we're doing something that's maybe beneficial for us or skillful for us or whatever it may be, but then the results of those actions are unpleasant results. And then we have to reflect back, well, why did that yield unpleasant results? I thought I was doing something skillful. And we can reflect back and see that maybe our motives weren't the best. Maybe the reasoning that we put into deciding on that course of action was flawed. So it really speaks to this sense of self-reflection that's really prominent in this practice. In terms of reflection, when the Buddha taught his son Rahula, the very first thing that he taught him was to reflect on his actions, was to reflect on himself as if he was holding up a mirror. That was the very basics of this practice. Reflect on what you're doing, not only after you've done it, but reflect on what you're doing before you do it. Reflect on what you're doing while you're doing it, and reflect on what you're doing after you've done it. And if at any point during those reflections you see that it's starting to bring harm to yourself or someone else, you have the resolve to cut that action, no matter how much time you've invested into it, no matter how much you've built it up. If you see that it's actually causing harm, you have to be able to cut it. The same way the Buddha practiced ascetic practices for years and would only eat a grain of rice or a handful of rice a day, and got to looking like this up here, the emaciated Buddha, almost a skeleton of himself. And he practiced that for years. And then when he finally reflected on it and saw how much harm it was bringing to him and how it wasn't really beneficial, the harm that it was bringing greatly outweighed the benefit that it could possibly bring. He had the strength of will, even after years of devoting himself to that practice, to think there must be a better way. There must be another way. And then he got better from that point. He got himself healthy again. And then he pursued a middle path, not falling into this practice of asceticism and not living a life of luxury, but instead reflecting each moment whether something's beneficial, non-beneficial, and having that resolve to follow through on those reflections and not just make those observations. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions on any of the verses or anything like that? If you're interested in reading these verses of the Dhammapada, I'll see if I can paste them in the chat. Yeah, that's what I was reading from, if anyone's interested. So if there's no other questions or comments, we can go ahead and close early. Feel free to check out those verses of the Dhammapada. It should link right to the full section, but there's a bunch of other sections too. And it can be a really beneficial meditation companion to read one or two of these verses and then set them aside and meditate. And then read those same couple of verses afterwards. So with that, we'll close with a dedication of merit. May all those who suffer at this time be freed from all stress and pain. May they be happy and at ease. May they be healthy. May any merit gained from this meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those in need. And may we all be happy and healthy and free from stress and pain. Metta karuna mudita upekha sahanga teya cetasa chaturi sambharatva viharati samba buddharo pavena samba dhammaro pavena samba sangharo pavena sote hantu nirantaram. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you next week.